So we had extensive discussion on item L, no, not L, J, about regulatory text for continuing education of zero net carbon design. And we are not completely ready to vote for on a final language, but the process allows us to vote on what we have consented, and staff will continue the rulemaking process, and additional comments from public will be collected, and the board member will have one more options to opportunities to take action of it. So with that said, if you recall, the three main concerned area we discussed is one, definition, two, scope and topics of education that qualifies for the net zero carbon, and the third one is who. What is the qualifications a provider should have? So we have in that level category, board has some text that staff can use to further their work. So I like in a reverse order. First of all, board does not have additional comment on C, the topics of continuing education for net zero carbon, and board has comments on definition and qualification. I like start with a motion, a language for the motion on qualification part, which is F, and I like invite either Robert or staff can help as well to actually read the motion, and before we open for public comment. And which one of you can read that?
Well, if staff can do it, since I think we went over it, that would be great because they'll have to document it later anyway.
Karen, go ahead. This is address F, line item F.
Okay, so for subdivision F, we leave the sentence as is until the term zero net carbon building design, and then we strike out with a minimum of 3 projects within the last 10 years, and then the sentence continues. So it will read expertise in zero net carbon building design, and I think we need an and there, and in the designing of carbon neutral and or high performance buildings or groups of buildings, and goes on. So we're striking with a minimum of 3 projects within the last 10 years and adding the word and before the sentence continues.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
What I like about that is that without the years, but you're still putting in 2 major areas of expertise. Zero net carbon, because you say and designing of carbon neutral. So that's a very highly qualified person.
Should it say or?
What do you guys think? And or? Yeah, I think you can say or.
Yet,
yeah.
That's broader for what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Allow more
Okay.
people to.
Yeah. Otherwise.
Robert, is that enough accuracy for what your early comment?
I agree with that for subpart F so far.
Okay, great. So we now have board member Gladstone.
We got to do 1 and 2 and 3 if you're going to continue 1 and 3. I thought.
Okay. We'll provide additional language for the definition, which is A2.
We're on F1.
Now we go back to A2. We're done with F.
question out there.
We are going back to definition A2. And board member Gladstone will read the motion that we are going to vote on.
Okay, I'm going to dictate some language. Now, I know that we have competing concerns here. We have to have some language and to vote on, and we need to vote to meet a statutory deadline. I recognize that the language I'm going to dictate may not meet all the concerns of all board members, but I understand from staff, and maybe staff can confirm that if we vote on language I'm proposing, it can be changed later after it goes to the appropriate next level. And that is, board members can change what I'm proposing at a later time. Is that right, Laura?
So whatever the board approves today, if the board wants to modify the language later on in the process, we can bring it back to the board, and the board could amend the language and approve modified text.
Thank you. Okay. So I'm going to refer to A2, and I'd like to add to what's on the screen. First of all, looking at the screen, A2.
Would you mind maybe read the whole front portion as well as the whole motion?
Okay.
Oh.
Well, let me. I will read it, but let me first take some words out, and I'll read it entirely afterward. So in A2, cross out the word annually, put in the phrase over the building project's life cycle, period, and then add a sentence as follows. This also includes architectural design responsive to embodied carbon reduction and resilient performance of a facility that results in reduced embodied carbon or minimized carbon, period. I'd also like to insert the word equitably on the third line between the words or and procures. I'd also like to create a new subsection 2I and 2II, and 2I will read as follows. For the purpose of this section A2, comma, resilient performance describes the capacity of a system, for example, a community, comma, society, or ecosystem, comma, to stand shocks and continue to function, period. I'd like to have a section II, which reads as follows. For the purpose of this subsection A2, the phrase, quote, equitably procures from off-site, unquote, shall refer to consideration of environmental justice goals, period. And I think that's all the changes that I am proposing to that section.
I didn't understand the first change.
Should I read it again?
Yeah, I didn't understand that.
Okay, the single I was going to say, for the purpose of subsection or subsection A2, resilient performance, which is the word that is used in the highlighted portion of handout 3, which is now in this section. Resilient performance describes the capacity of a system, for example, a community, comma, society, or ecosystem, comma, to withstand shocks and still continue to function. What kind of shocks? Well,
I don't understand that either.
Well, what I had in mind is we could say to withstand physical environmental shocks, or physical shocks. And by that I mean referring to floods, earthquakes, storms. We could identify those.
Yeah, you can say calamities or,
Oh, right. Or why don't we say to withstand calamities?
yeah, physical calamities.
Physical calamity. Well, calamity is physical, I think. Well, physical calamity is fine, and still continue to function. I'd like to just repeat that we have a chance to change this later, board members, as per staff, but we're trying to meet a deadline here. Thank you.
Any discussions before we open to public?
It seemed like he talked about the resiliency, and in the equitable definition, he included reference to environmental justice, I believe. It's in C, there were references, at least originally, to those terms like resilient design and climate justice. And I thought President Chang made some changes to use the phrase environmental justice. So I'm wondering whether, Brett, we shouldn't limit this to just for purposes of subsection A2, given that those terms appear sort of in C, and just say it applies to the whole section.
Can you show on the screen the section that you're talking about, Ron? Robert, I mean?
Adding more definitions. I think, Robert, is that to your suggestion? What is the climate resiliency? What is the environmental justice? Is that what you're asking?
You had, that language is in C as amended by you, so why,
right.
these definitional changes I think are good, but why limit them to only as used in A2? So it kind of gives some context when those same terms or similar terms are used in sub C, that's all.
So just say for the purposes of this section, meaning.
Yes,
one,
exactly, not just that subsection. But
Okay, so we could say for the purpose of section
A2? No.
Just say for the
No,
purposes of this section, and that is all of section 166 of Article 10.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, I'll take that. We'll add that to the beginning of single I and double I. We'll add the following phrase, that for the purpose of this section 166, comma, that will get added to the beginning of I and double I.
All you need to say in a regulation to mean that is for the purposes of this section.
Fine. We don't need the section number. Okay, then it will say for the purpose of this section, comma, at the beginning of I and double I. Thank you, Robert.
Okay. May I open to public comment now, board members? Okay. So again, start with the public members in the room here in Sacramento. Can I see a hand or anyone want to speak up on this topic? I see Eric, and can you proceed to the microphone because we need audio recording.
Thank you, President Peng. I believe before break there was a question regarding my name and title needing to be restated. So for the record, my name is Eric Drever. I am Principal Architect over Architectural Codes and Policies at Division of the State Architect. And then I would like to clarify also that the public comment period is over all of the language or explicit to the language you're proposing right now?
All the language.
Okay. So I'll start with, President Peng, you had identified 3 areas of concern that the board was concerning themselves with. I would propose that DSA has a 4th concern, which we will bring up again in a subsequent agenda item, and that is testing. There is language in this proposal regarding testing requirements that we would suggest some alternative language to explicitly separate live webinars and conferences as needing to require testing from an on-demand course, which traditionally does provide testing. Currently, there aren't testing requirements either offered by DSA or by other agencies that require testing as part of a live presentation. There are limitations to that. Certainly, you can understand at a conference, a live conference, that attendance is a requirement for continuing education, not a testing protocol.
Yeah.
So that would be my first comment. I think in regards to the proposed language for the requirements of a tester, or excuse me, of a provider, education provider, that we would propose you expand the language to include or a regulatory agency that employs experts. Amend to the end of the proposed language to include regulatory agencies that employ. So specifically, you might say at the end of item 166A1, or technical staff of a state regulatory agency with statutory authority for green building standards. So that's proposed language.
Question. Are you saying that DSA, people like you, staff like you, could be a provider? Is that what you're saying?
We do provide training, and we have statutory requirements to provide training. And that training, to clarify the term I used earlier about engineers, architects employed by DSA and by the state, civil engineers employed by DSA and the state, are required to hold licenses. Mechanical and electrical engineers explicitly, their job title is mechanical engineer. However, they are not required by the state to hold a license. So that's the clarification I would provide there. And so, again, we employ mechanical engineers and electrical engineers to provide training that are not licensed.
It's really interesting.
With regards to some of the definitions that you are proposing to include on the types of training that are allowable, I think practitioners would understand that water conservation is part and parcel to topics like sustainability and resiliency. However, I think the language seems to stop short of explicitly including water conservation, which is an important, very important topic, certainly in California and across the nation. So we would suggest that staff consider the inclusion of some water conservation topics as potential topics for continuing education.
See, that's what I mean.
Okay, great.
We're gonna
Thank
do
you.
something.
Eric, thank you very much. Any other members in this room would like offer public comment? I see none. We are going to turn public comment to the remote location, and then after that, public comment to virtual attendees.
We do have a public comment.
Okay, my name is Janice Kent. I am a licensed architect. I'm also a CES provider for the AIA, so I know about the learning units and how that whole process works for AIA. For item I on this particular thing, where it says within 5 business days from the administration of the post-course test, a provider shall issue a certificate of completion to each participant. What I would suggest is 2 things on this. 5 days is very quick. AIA allows 10 days. So I would suggest we align with AIA because it makes more sense for this to happen. 5 days is just way too quick. And then also I would like to say, and I wanted to talk more on that when we get to the continuing education aspect later on, if we ever get there today, is that a test is only provided by AIA if it is a recorded on-demand webinar. A test is not provided in order to get learning units, nor are there any organizations I know that provide teaching and training and seminars that provide a test or a mechanism for testing if it is live or if it's an in-person or if it's a Zoom type seminar. So I would highly suggest that this be looked at to align itself with AIA because they have a whole methodology for testing when it's appropriate, how many questions, and how to implement that. That's what I have to say on that topic.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very good. Any other comments from remote location?
We have no more comment, but board member comment when we go back into that area.
Okay. We're open to virtual attendees.
We are open for public comment via Webex. We've got a couple of comments standing by. In the meantime, if you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. Our first request comes from Glenn from AIA. I'm going to read what you wrote, and then I'm going to send you a request to unmute your microphone. Glenn wrote, Subdivision F excludes numerous qualified providers, such as manufacturers' reps. The section also excludes qualified self-directed study, such as NCARB monographs. Go ahead, Glenn.
Hi, good afternoon. I wholly agree with the past two commenters from DSA and Ms. Kent. That said, the language around F is very, very specific to building design and design. A lot of the learning that I've already acquired relative to zero net has not been focused on design aspects of a building, possibly components of a building, but not exclusively design of a building. That said as well, some of the other training that's out there and available that I found very satisfactory was from utilities, Southern California Edison, SMUD, and I don't believe they meet the requirements that are currently listed in section F. It really should be broadened to allow for those types of training. Very good quality, very good providers, but they would not meet these very, very specific requirements. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have a request from Mark, AIA California. Bear with me, Mark. I'm going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the California Architects Board. Mark Christian with AIA California. First, the excellent work that the board members did today in modifying the language. I will certainly send that language to our thought leaders on this, and we'll provide comments to you in short order. I would like to echo and add to the comments that Eric with DSA and Janice from the West Hollywood location made regarding the when a test should be required. There is a national standard out there for architectural continuing education. It is a standard that is used and accepted by every jurisdiction, state government, a region within the United States, when it requires an architect to take continuing education to renew the license. And that standard is a test is required only if it's not a live course. Additionally, the pass rate is 70%, not 80%. So we would respectfully ask the board to amend the language, which is paragraph E in the agenda packet, to require a test only if it is not a live course, and to have a pass rate at 70%. Again, every state, every jurisdiction that requires an architect to take continuing education to renew a license follows that standard. If the California Architects Board adopts the language as is written here, it will be the only state to deviate from that standard, and we believe there is benefit to having the same standard. For California licensed architects who reside in other states, it will make it easier for them to take the continuing education where they live. For California architects who live in California, yet who are licensed in other states, it will make it easier for them to take courses that qualify in other states as well. We believe there is a value to having a national standard on architectural mandatory continuing education. This is a simple fix, and we respectfully ask the board to make that fix in the language. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Any other comments?
At the moment, there are no other comments for requests for comments, Mr. President.
Let's come back to the board for the action. I want to share some of my perspective with the requirement of 80% as a passing score and the testing for a live training or education session. So I just want to remind our architects members for all these past years, when we take 5 hours of accessibility required education, when we take in person, the enforcement of that quality is through the length of that session, which is 5 hours. You need to sit there listening to the speakers, anywhere from lawyers to actual physically impaired person, but in the field of accessibility, and you learn by listening and by being there, be part of concerns, and so I feel personally I have learned adequately, and I feel that submitting that certificate for the 5 hours without testing was satisfactory for me as an architect to protect consumers. So that's one. Since we're pressing for time, I organized my thoughts together. Another aspect is the passing score, the cutting score. So we are part of National Council of Architecture Registration Board, which we are a member of. And on the regulatory fronts, we often want to align with the more countrywide global practice. For example, the AIE, which is Architecture Examination Test, to passing to be architect, the ranging of cutting score for a law candidate to pass is around 60% to 70%. So these are the testers will become a future architect. So, and that's feeding our profession. So I personally not specifically concerned that 70% versus 80%. I understand the staff has studied the situation, but one comment I like my fellow board member aware of that is a more stringent requirement may limit the more opportunities for the providers and for the candidates to choose these very viable otherwise training sessions. So think about that line. If we don't believe that the 80% versus 70% impacts our consumer protection responsibility, and I would rather to see ourselves align with the industry and with our umbrella organization of NCOB. So that's my observation. I hopefully help some of the board members may not as familiar with the subject move to the discussion a little more quicker in interest of time. So any members have any concerns? How about the remote locations?
Yes.
So, Robert Pierman, so I would endorse changing E to say that applies to test only in a non-live in-person setting. I would endorse changing to 70%, and I would endorse changing I to 10 business days.
Okay. Okay. Do you want to make a motion so we can engage public?
Well, are we making motions point by point, or we're going to make a whole motion?
Just as you said, I think it's very precise. Is the staff okay just to use what Roberts just said? I think it's very specific.
Yeah.
It's on the record. You want him to repeat? Yeah, let's do it. Okay, he wants, Karen wants you to repeat, Robert, sorry.
So subpart A, the requirement of the test would be to a participant in a non-live in-person course only is the idea. So you can modify the language you want, but that's the whole point. The test would only be when you're not in person, as Tian said. And the second sentence would change the passing minimum passing score to 70%.
Can you let him finish?
So to a participant who takes a pre-recorded course not presented live or on Zoom?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, whatever you think is more precise.
Yeah.
We go along with you.
That's clearer.
Yeah, we go along with you. Sorry, we interrupted you, Robert.
Yeah, I'll give her a second. And then otherwise 70%, not 80% in the second sentence.
Yeah.
And then going down to I, subpart I, just changing 5 business days to 10 business days.
Yeah.
Maybe we should, well, it says the post-course test. Should we say any just to make it clear that it's not always required? Would that be a meaningful change there in that first line? Say any post-course test to make it clear it's not always required, given the change we just made. Made no big deal.
Completion.
It might be clearer to just say from the end of the course.
Yeah, I'm okay with 10 days at the end of course.
If you take out business, then it's not quite so long. So if it's 10 days from the end of the course.
Okay.
Good.
Except Christmas and New Year. No, I'm joking.
Then we would also have to strike from shall issue a certificate of completion to each participant, period, striking who successfully passes the test as defined in subsection E. Ooh, we have to figure that one out because participants who fail the non-live course test and get less than 70%, we don't want them getting a certificate of completion.
Do we have the ability to change this later, Laura?
You have some better language?
We're being specific enough, Karen, right?
Yeah.
Like the previous, if the board wants to modify it, we can bring back modified text for the board to vote on.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussions before open to public comment? Here now, anyone from public in the room wish to offer additional comment before we move to the next group? I see now we are moving to the remote locations. See for any public comment.
Yes, we have a public comment.
Under I, where it says within 5 business days, what we can say is within 10 days from completion of the course or passing of the test for a recorded course. And that would take care of both situations. And then a provider shall issue a certificate. So within 10 days from the completion of a course or the passing for a recorded course. And that would align with AIA.
Okay, thank you. Sunny, are you good on the remote location? Okay.
Yes, there are no other public comments.
Okay, let's open to virtual attendees, moderator.
We are now open for public comment via Webex. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment here, would you like to return to the agenda?
Yes, please, thank you. And just want to remind you, after look at the document discussed and hearing public comment, the board has input on the three aspects of this rulemaking document. One is we expanded the definition as already in the motion. Two is we clarified qualifications of instructor or provider. And three is the passing rate, passing scores, and when exam is necessary. And with all that three, I think we're ready to vote on the document.
Tian?
Staff, yeah.
I just have one comment about the definitions being in A2. So I and I. I think I is the one that I'm having problems with. The fact that the definition has an example when we actually have a, we have a category C that is more example related. So there's something about the relying on a very specific example to define a term that I'm bumping with. So I'm wondering if we could use a more sort of standard definition of resilient design. For instance, when I Google quickly, resilience is a strategy to enhance the ability of a building, facility, or community to both prevent damage and to recover from damage. Seems like more of a definition would be more appropriate than citing a specific example, which is very narrow.
Can you repeat that more slowly, please?
But
and
hold a second. Hold a second. Sorry. If we change our motion, will you have to open up the public then?
That's right. But the motion hasn't been stated clearly anyway.
But you need public comment on the motion.
Yeah, okay. So, Sunny, go ahead if you feel strongly, but our approach was we know the definition is imperfect, and we will use the process to correct it, and Laura assured us we have that process in place.
Muzzled.
Are you okay? Did you say you're okay or not okay? Oh, he's good. Great. Okay. So we have a motion. Why we say we don't have? Oh, we added one item. So, okay. So I'm looking for someone make a motion to document all three comments. Yeah.
So when we were working through this, we did the beginning of the change on F, and we did not discuss exactly the changes on 1 and 3 of F because we jumped over to hear Mr. Gladstone's changes on A.
No, I thought Robert has actually discussed, stated the motion, and you repeated on F, for entire F, is it not?
Right, so we could just go ahead and read 1 and 3 again if you'd like, Karen. I can just double check.
No, we're done. We need to move on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the suggested motion. The board is asked to consider a motion to approve the proposed regulatory text as amended for 16 CCR section 116, direct and authorize the executive officer to take all steps necessary to initiate the rulemaking process, make any technical or non-substantive changes to the package, submit the text to the Director of the Department of Consumer Affairs and the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency for review, notice the proposed text for a 45-day comment period, and set the matter for a hearing if requested. If no adverse comments are received during the 45-day comment period and no hearing is requested, authorize the executive officer to take all steps necessary to complete the rulemaking and adopt the proposed regulation at section 166 as noticed.
And how this additional specifics be part of it afterward you read? Okay, yes? As amended. Okay.
Karen, I think,
great.
wants to change my motion.
Okay, yeah.
That's not what the board thinks they're doing. It was just
So-
the last section when it says, and authorize the executive officer to take all steps to finish it. we just say, and authorize the executive officer to return the matter to the board for discussion at the next meeting.
Why don't we just eliminate the last sentence then?
Okay.
Okay. So, the board is asked to consider a motion to approve the proposed regulatory text for 16 CCR Section 166, direct and authorize the executive officer to take all steps necessary to initiate the rulemaking process, make any technical or non-substantive changes to the package, submit the text to the Director of the Department of Consumer Affairs and the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency for review, notice the proposed text for a 45-day comment period, and set the matter for hearing if requested.
That didn't include as amended in the meeting today. Sorry.
Maybe
Let's have a clear
The
record.
board is asked to consider a motion to approve the proposed regulatory text as amended today for 16 CCR Section 166, direct and authorize the executive officer to take all steps necessary to initiate the rulemaking process, make any technical or non-substantive changes to the package, submit the text to the Director of the Department of Consumer Affairs and the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency for review, notice the proposed text for a 45-day comment period, and set the matter for a hearing if requested.
Great. How nice that English is not your second language. Great. Great. I like this. Are we okay? Good. Someone move the motion?
I so move, Robert Pearman.
Okay, Robert Pearman moved the motion. Anyone second?
I'll second.
Sylvia Kwan second. Now we're open to public comment again before the board's vote.
Any comment?
Again, start with in-room attendees. I see no hands. And we can turn to the remote location and the virtual attendee.
No comments.
Great.
This is the moderator. We are now open for public comment via Webex. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comments, do you wish to return to the agenda?
Yes, please. We'll return to the agenda. When you're doing this, we can start the roll call. Secretary Blackstone, please.
Yes. I'm going to call a roll for that. Ian Feng?
Aye.
Rick Gladstone? Aye. Peter Kanani? Aye. Ron Jones?
Aye.
Robert Pearman? Robert Chairman? You have to turn on a mic. Sonny Ward?
Aye. Did you say, Rob?
Robert
We can
Chairman.
hear you. Hi.
Robert,
Here.
okay, so that's unanimous.
Okay, unanimous. And we thank you for all the public comment, for your patience sitting here. And we have two more items of your interest. Let's move right into agenda item L. Discuss and a possible action on modified regulatory text for disability access continuing education. And again, we ask staff Karen Hobolt provide the overview, and I suggest to see if you could be brief, and because both board members and public members are fairly aware of the content of it.
Okay, the board received public comment. It's in the materials. The proposals were made to change the modified text, and if I may presume upon the good nature of the board, I would recommend right now we change the modified text that you have to match the language we just adopted, so that in section 165, going down to section D, we change the language to read, a provider shall only issue a certificate of completion to a participant who takes a pre-recorded course not presented live or on Zoom upon the participant successfully passing a test of the participant's knowledge and understanding of the CE coursework. Successfully passing shall mean a minimum cumulative passing score of at least 70%.
Great.
Then those two play well together.
Thank you. But again, I want to commend staff to put this forward. Finally, we have something measurable and more specific we can enforce, make our work of enforcement far more effective. So anyway, it is a very similar concern from some of the public entities. So I have a board member to think through. If you have any concerns for what Karen's suggestion, we automatically updated the same requirement from the net zero carbon to accessibility of passing rate and the testing requirement for on-demand class only. So,
President Feng?
Yeah.
We would also need to make an amendment right now to subdivision H, because that reads within 5 business days of the administration of the course test. And we want to revise that to match the language that Janice provided, to within 10 days of, from the completion of the course or the passing of the test of a recorded course, a provider shall issue.
Okay. I thought the consistency is important, and this is the good work that they put forward to board to vote on. Can I ask any members who want to discuss more? I'm interested to make this a motion. Not here on site in Southern California. Any members of the board want further discuss on this item?
No, and I just want to remind everybody of some of the comments that you made in the previous area, that the NCARB test that the architects take, the pass rate is anywhere from 58 to 71%, and that every other state in the country accepts 70%, according to the AIA. So I'd like to make a motion that we accept these changes as amended and vote on this.
I second your motion.
Am I understand that the change was there a change from 80% to 70% as well, or is that relevant here?
We don't need a motion.
80 to 70.
So Karen read the proposed changes that we made to the zero net carbon design. She proposed the same changes to the disability access CE. So when the board is ready for a motion, that is part of it. I'll read the full motion, and it'll read like the last one to incorporate the changes just discussed.
But we still need a motion, right?
You need a motion on the whole thing, not on.
We're ready down here for you to state that motion.
Okay.
So we'll mute.
Two-part
Oh, and the second part of the motion is that you read the reviewed proposed responses prepared by staff, and you feel that they consider and respond to the 4 public comment letters that were received.
I'll read the full motion. The board is asked to consider a motion to approve the proposed modified text as amended today, amending 16 CCR section 165 for a 15-day public comment period, and if no adverse comments are received during the 15-day public comment period, delegate to the executive officer the authority to adopt the proposed modified text, and also delegate to the executive officer the authority to make any technical or non-substantive changes to the proposed modified text that may be required in completing the rulemaking file and adopting the proposed regulatory changes. The second action is the board is asked, upon reviewing and considering the public comments received during the 45-day public comment period, to adopt the proposed responses to the written comments.
So is the Sunny's motion stays, and my second, yes? When you say the whole thing is
Yes, I'll restate that motion. I'd like to make a motion that we approve Laura's language.
Yes, I second. And we are opening this sessions to public comment. Again, we start with in-room attendees and move to the remote and the virtual. I see Eric. Could you please come to the microphone to offer your comments?
Thank you again, President Peng. For the record, my name is Eric Drever, Principal Architect at Division of the State Architect. I had prepared a statement today, but in the interest of time, I would propose that I just submit the statement to you, but highlight a couple of items. One was in the proposed language, the reference to Zoom meetings clearly or is explicitly a proprietary term that I would suggest not be included, and perhaps the term webinar, live webinar, could be used as a replacement to the term Zoom. Secondly, again, I would just submit my proposed statement. I do want to say that we are a little bit further along in the process here, so and considering the topic relates to civil rights, if we limit the continuing education opportunities for architects, we are also limiting the education on accessibility, which is a civil rights issue. So the importance of this topic, because it's related to civil rights, is in my assertion, of higher importance. Certainly sustainability is a very important topic to DSA. However, because there is a federal requirement and that the potential to limit the education related to accessibility, which is a civil rights issue, could potentially put in harm's way, well, not harm's way, but put at risk the education related to accessibility. So including the terminology related to live webinars is of crucial importance to DSA's educational program, which again, we are statutorily mandated to provide. Our live webinars do not offer testing at the end of them, as I stated earlier in the sustainability topic, we offer certificates of completion for live presentations. Certainly through our on-demand processes, we do offer testing or require testing, and so for those on-demand type courses, it's appropriate in our assertion to provide a testing limit. I have no comment on the 70% versus 80% pass rate.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other members from this room? We're good. And we are turning to Southern California location for public comment.
We have public comment.
The one thing I wanted to bring to the board's attention is that if we are aligning ourselves with the requirements for AIA for testing, they have a system of certain number of questions, types of questions, and the pass rate that we talked about. So we are aligning ourselves with that. And I just wanted to put that out there because I don't know if I made that clear before.
Okay, thank you for your comment. If nothing from, no one else from Southern California location, we can do virtual attendees.
All clear.
We are now accepting public comment via Webex. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. And our first request comes from Mark, AIA, California. Bear with us just a moment. We're sending you a request to unmute your microphone.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Architects Board. Thank you. That's pretty much my only comment. Thank you to the members of the board. Thank you to the fantastic board staff. We fully support these proposed changes to the proposed regulation. Thank you.
And there are no other requests for comment via Webex. We wish to
Okay,
return
now
to
we
the-
can return to our agenda items. How can we still make this minor amendment that instead of a Zoom, we called online training or something? Live webinar.
Recorded
And
webinar.
could that be a technical change? But yes, we can do that without another vote.
Okay.
Should it be live webinar or recorded webinar?
Live,
The language is to and
So when you're live, you're not taking a test. You're getting a certificate of completion. When you're recorded, that's when you have to take the test. So it's a recorded webinar.
Yes. Yeah, maybe that's the definition. Recorded a webinar. Oh, yeah.
that actually refers to the previous text, and we should finish this text and then do a motion to switch that word in the previous text.
This is not substance in nature. Can staff fix them later?
It's questionable if it's non-substantive.
No question. Staff can fix it.
Live webinar for Zoom. You need the live in there so that it's,
Got it. So what would you like us to do?
finish the vote on this.
Okay.
As it is, yeah. Okay, great. So I think the board is ready to vote on this agenda item. Okay.
So let me just ask, since we're changing the motion, I presume the maker of the motion and the seconder are good. And is there any other board member that would object to that? Otherwise, we'd have to formally amend the motion.
I'm
Hearing
still
none.
with the motion.
Thank you. All right, we're ready, Mr. Secretary.
Okay. Let's take a vote on that motion. Tien Feng?
Aye.
Brett Gladstone? Aye. Mitra Kanani? Sylvia Kwan?
Aye.
Ron Jones?
Aye.
Robert Pierman?
Aye.
Sonny Ward?
Aye.
Okay, we have 6 votes.
Okay, unanimous. And now we are into agenda M. I'm okay. And discuss possible action of modified proposed regulatory text that for the Article 8, Section 152, I think it is to do with, correct me if wrong, the requirement of architects must include their license in any form of advertisement.
There's one in between. This is on citations.
Okay, can I move, because there's a vast public of interest, can I move that item as a president first?
Mr.
The
President,
citation
it's
was
a
pretty quick.
slam dunk.
Yeah, it's very quick.
Don't do it?
It's really fast.
Okay. Go for it. And, Karen, you're the staff again. Yeah, please walk through this agenda item.
Okay, we had this package. It went to the Office of Administrative Law. It had a concern that the Office of Administrative Law said, withdraw it, put out this modified text, resubmit, and you can be finished. And the modified text is in your materials. It was changing the term and to or, and for clarity, adding at the end of the sentence, except a higher fine may be assessed when expressly authorized by statute. The regulation sections have one relating to pretending to be an architect and sell services where people are in a state of emergency, so there's been a fire or something, and the statute allows for an imposition of a fine of up to $10,000. And the OAL attorney said this is limiting only to $2,500, so put an express exception to be very clear. And that's the language that they said, please circulate. We circulated it. It was sent out for public comment. There were no public comments. We simply need the board to approve this text and instruct the executive officer to do the resubmission so that this becomes a rulemaking.
So the proposed motion for this one we'd ask for from the board is, the board is asked to consider a motion to approve the proposed modified text amending 16 CCR section 152, which was circulated for a 15-day public comment period from March 24th, 2022 to April 8th, 2022, and receive no public comments, and to delegate to the executive officer the authority to adopt the proposed modified text, and also delegate to the executive officer the authority to make any technical or non-substantive changes that may be required in completing the rulemaking file and adopting the proposed regulatory changes.
I'd like to make a motion to accept that text. Or to make that motion.
Okay, and I'll second.
Okay, we're open to public comment. Start from room. I have not seen anyone. Yes? No? No? We will switch to Southern California location.
No comment.
Virtual attendees.
We are open for public comment via Webex. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to return to the agenda?
Yes, please. Now, we are moving to... Oh, vote. Do we need to vote? Yes?
Yep.
Okay.
We need to vote.
Yeah. Yes, let's do roll call vote.
Laura?
Yeah, I think Sylvia second.
Okay. And Laura read the motion?
Yeah.
Okay. Roll call. Tian Feng.
Aye.
Brett Gladstone. Aye. Mitra Kanani.
Aye.
Sylvia Kwan.
Aye.
Ron Jones.
Aye.
Robert Pearman.
Aye.
Sonny Ward.
Aye.
We have 6 votes.
Great. Thank you. We move on to the next agenda. This is the agenda item that everyone come here for. And again, we will have staff provide an overview first. This is discuss and possible actions about regulatory language, about architects must include their license number for any forms of advertisement. And again, Karen, I think that both public members and board members are fairly familiar with the agenda item. And if you want to go brief, and we can engage conversation afterwards.
I am comfortable with the materials that you've been given. There was a considerable amount of public comment, and your regulated architects are more creative and inventive than most public commenters, and I have to tell you, it was something of a delight for me to read all of their ideas and suggestions. And they want you to think about what you're doing. We've got prepared responses to the comments. We have prepared proposed modifications to the text. This could go out. You could modify the text again. The board has many options. You just need to seriously consider and discuss the issues raised. And I know you've read through all of this and you're ready to work on it. So that's all.
Okay, thank you. And to facilitate the discussion, Karen or Laura, if you have peer, jurisdictions and any data that are comparable that you think inform our discussion, I will welcome that. Otherwise, I would.
I was just going to note, so we've been talking about this since 2019. The board first acted on it, or first heard it in September 2019, and sent it back to REC, which voted on it again. The board approved the language at the December 11th, 2020 meeting with no public comment. and approved it unanimously. And they approved modified language September 10th, 2021, also with no public comment received. And I believe Karen has mentioned that other BCA boards are moving in this direction. Maybe she can elaborate on that.
There has been a strong push with the Department of Consumer Affairs to have licensed individuals put their license number on it as a part of consumer protection, to raise the public's consciousness that there are boards that are supervising and that these people are licensed, and that the public has a way of dealing with things that go wrong. They can bring it to the board. Over time, more boards are getting these license numbers on it. The Landscape Architects Technical Committee has adopted that. They had a delayed time for starting, but over time, other boards will. So if it's not ripe now, know the pressure will continue for this, and see what makes the most sense for the board.
Okay, great. Thank you. You may want to stay here, Karen, in case we need you. So we can start the conversation and amongst the board members.
Yes, I have a question for Karen and Laura. Is there any board or bureau under the jurisdiction of the Department of Consumer Affairs that has considered this and decided against it?
Not that I'm aware of.
Not that I'm aware of.
And which ones, maybe you don't recall at this moment, which ones have voted on it and decided for it within the Department of Consumer, either a bureau or a board?
Yeah, I only have 8 boards, and several of mine are the medical boards. So I'm like the least best for this, because they haven't done that for the med board or physician assistant.
Yeah, I'm not sure offhand. We could look to see how many offer it, which we probably do have. I would note, though, like for the medical boards, they don't have this particular language, but I think all the professions are required to post in their office a sign telling consumers how they're regulated, that they're regulated by the medical board, dental board, and how to contact the board if they have a complaint. So I would consider that to be somewhat comparable to this.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, what that went by me a little quick. What's comparable?
Like the healthcare professions,
Yeah.
They have to post a notice in their office informing patients that they're licensed by, say, the medical board or the dental board, and how to contact that board if they have a complaint to file.
But it's posted in their office. It's not on their website. It's not on their advertising, et cetera.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
So little bit of history I know of, because I was the liaison to Landscape Technical Committee. And the concern was so many competing entities in that realm, and the consumer could get confused. Landscaper, landscape designer, arborist, landscape architect. I believe I recall the conversation. The Landscape Technical Committee member was supportive, because they think by requiring the license as a landscape architect, that will make a difference, that make a distinguishing, that they are licensed professionals versus others. But their line of work slightly different than architects, and so there are potential challenges if we adopt this regulation. My concern is the enforcement of it. Some sector of architecture practice may not be even feasible to including individuals' license number in their company's brochures, because they are multinational corporations. They have some of the insurance policy issues. So be prepared if we are going forward. We may want to have a set of enforcement policy in place. So that's some of the considerations I have, but I think it is very concerning issues to many entities. So what is the board's suggestion? Should we make a motion, or I can, with our legal counsel permission, to hearing from public first?
I'd like to hear from the public first myself.
Okay. So I would now invite, take this as a public comment period, invite that the public members in this room to present your opinions and for board to consider it. Yes, please.
My name is Laura Noss Dokis, hyphenated, AIA. I'm the Vice President of the AIA Central Valley, a member of the AIA California Board of Directors, and Vice President and Principal of Lionakis Architects. Interestingly, my hyphenated name can be found on your search engine as hyphenated and under both halves of that name. So finding my license number has not been a problem. We understand and concur with the mission to protect consumers. We do not believe the proposals further that mission. I'm wearing two hats today, as I mentioned, the first as a member of the AIA, the second as a principal of our firm. The first comments I'll make are rulemaking driven as a member of the AIA. We believe that the response to the initial concerns raised in the 45-day comment period did not only not adequately respond to the comments our organization provided, but are not in keeping with the rulemaking standards that dictate. For that reason, as well as for the reasons we stated in our original response, we ask that this item be withdrawn. Specifically, item number 1, modified text ambiguity. The staff report states that the intent of the text is to narrow the requirement for an architect to include their license number. The modified language does not appear to do this. This is all in our letter. I'm sure you have it, so I will be brief. Our second comment is insufficient response to objections and recommendations. We think this is significant. There were substantive comments in that 45-day period, and many of the responses were either at minimum unsubstantiated and borderline dismissive. We have, in several instances, we think the reasons the board gave did not believe the concern existed, which I think many of us could prove that it does, that it was speculative, or simply that the board does not agree. We don't think that's really in keeping with the rulemaking objective. I'm going to switch hats and put my hat on as a Lionakis principal. Our firm is 170 people, 40 licensed architects in 4 offices in California. I think that puts us in the mid-sized category. We commented in the 45-day period, and just as an example, some of the board response to grouped comments is the board believes, and I underline that, that doesn't seem as a substantive response, and that delayed effective date, larger firms, non-architecture firms, individuals or firms with multi-state practices will be able to design creative and elegant solutions. While we appreciate you wanting us to have creative and elegant solutions, that doesn't appear to me to be the substance of the rulemaking. The communication, I think, is difficult. Having sat here now since 10 a.m., I'm not really surprised that active practitioners are not engaged in the rulemaking process. I think that the concern that we have is the idea of putting an individual's license on a firm's presentment is concerning. Secondly, most architectural firms that have more than one licensed architect are going through a reviewing agency that requires licensure and stamp as part of that process. So if we begin to differentiate those architects at that time. So additionally, we are really concerned that the burden of policing non-licensed professionals is falling on the 40,000 licensed professionals in this state. So, you know, I think the AIA wants its comments in this 15-day period to be specifically focused on rulemaking. However, as a practitioner, I feel the need to sort of talk about this more widely as an issue not only of communication, but how we apply our license to the profession.
Thank you. Hold it just a second. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask a question of the last speaker, excuse me. Maybe another board member has a question too. I'm sure you're aware of the role the board plays in public protection and the like, and I don't have to go through that. But have you or your organization considered any alternatives that might be acceptable in lieu of going in the direction that we have been going?
So the AIA's Central Valley's letter during the 45-day comment, my colleague Paul Menard was going to speak to those items, provided 4 bulleted items that we thought were in better position to educate the public. We would concur with those as practitioners. I'll let Paul talk to those. But those are, in addition, areas that we didn't think were adequately responded to by the board's response to those comments. Paul, you want to? I teed you up.
Thanks, Laura. Good afternoon, Mr. President and members of the board. I'm Paul Menard, AIA, and I recently received my certified building official designation from the International Code Council, so I hold that as well. And my day job is I'm actually the building official for the UC Davis Health Facilities Program on the medical center campus here in Sacramento. But again, thank you for this public service that you do serving on this board. I appreciate it. As Laura said, we have a few alternatives to talk about. And before I do that, though, I really would like to just reiterate what Laura said about how easy and straightforward it is to get on the California Architects Board website and check somebody's license. It's very easy. It takes, 30 seconds or something, and you've got it. So I just want to reiterate that. So the items that we included in our letter are, one, preparing a campaign that educates the public on the importance of using a licensed architect. And part of this education campaign could be to show everybody exactly how easy it is to find somebody's license on the website, and to, talk about the importance of hiring a licensed architect. We believe that architects are, and there was a little bit of discussion a minute ago about some of the medical positions, but we believe that architects are, one of the classic professions like physicians, certified public accountants, attorneys, and so on. And we should be, thought about in that same category in the same way when it comes to this sort of requirement. So education campaign for the public. Second one is education campaign for planning and building department staff on what they should look for when a license is required. And, I feel like that this education component is so important, and that we can all help the public by educating them more than they currently are. This, some of these topics are fairly obscure, and people just don't understand what's going on. So I think these educational campaigns could be very effective. The third item is working to standardize the professional designation for licensed architects to something like RA, which could stand for registered architect, or LA, licensed architect, similar to the term doctor for doctors and esquire for attorneys. And the fourth item is to somehow address the loss of protection of the title of architect in society due to technology usurping the term, such as software architects, enterprise architects, and so on. And we always hear, you know, if you listen to the news, you hear it, you know, at least once a day, the architect of whatever, and then they talk about something that somebody actually did. So as opposed to, you know, what we do as a profession, designing buildings. So we really would like to look at some of these proposed alternatives, and again, and one of our other colleagues who's down in the Southern California office is going to talk a little bit more about this as well. But we'd like to look at some of these alternatives and as we move forward, and you know, again, because of what Laura said and the other items that are contained in our letter, we really would like this to be placed on hold while we look at some other alternatives. So in the interest of time, I will end right there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members from public in the room want to speak? If not, we're going to move to our Southern California location.
We have a comment.
Yes, my name is Janice Kent. I'm a licensed architect. I'm also a fellow of the AIA, as I had mentioned earlier with some of my comments. This requirement that's being proposed, I'm finding it on many levels very upsetting. I'm a sole practitioner. It is not going to cost me $100 to do reprinting. My business cards, and I usually look for very good prices, get done online, and it's going to be close to $200. But I will have my graphic designer fee. I will have my website that I have to pay someone to update my website. It's a whole variety of different things. It is an expensive endeavor, which I figure would be in the vicinity of $800 to $1,000. And I'm a sole practitioner. That's one small piece of the thing. So when someone says it's only going to cost $100 or you could spread it out over another year, I feel I'm being disrespected. It's not something that is an appropriate response. I also do not feel that this is going to protect the public by me putting my numbers after my name on my business cards, on my website, on my stationery. Was said before, and what was said in one of the comments that CAB had given in the response, is that it's already public knowledge what the license numbers are, and it's very easy to look it up. It was even said in response to this. So if it's so easy to look up, why do I have to put it on everything? Now, mind you, I do put it on my correspondence. I put it on my agreements. I put it on drawings, but I usually am not stamping drawings, so I don't have that. So if it is easy to look up, this is not an issue for architects, but it is an issue for people who are pretending to be architects, and, as was just stated, the public, that they don't know that there is this protection for them. We need to let them know. And then, you know, what I have said is architect is part of a classic professions. Where you have attorneys, you have doctors, you have lawyers, that's attorneys. There's another one, CPAs and architects. It's been a long day, guys, listening to you. It's part of the classic professions. I look at all the business cards I've collected from the other professionals. No one has their license number on it. It is a personal license. It is not a business license. They are very, very different things. The other thing is, you're calling this or it is being called, I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but I like to, it's being called the advertising bill. And, you know, all of my practice, I don't advertise. I don't know what you mean by advertising. I mean, I don't pay for an ad in a newspaper. I don't put an ad in a phone book. What I do have is I write blog articles that are on my website. I send emails to let people know. Is that a form of advertising? That's a form of information dissemination that I don't get paid for. I have business cards. I meet someone, I give them my card, and that's a way for them to communicate with me, with my email, my phone number. It's not advertising. Do I get some work from it? Yes, I do, but it's not advertising. I give a lot of seminars and a lot of webinars. Is that a form of advertising? I get a lot of work from it, but I am not doing that for them to get business. I'm disseminating information. I publish books. I have my next book coming up next year, and it's being published by Wiley. Do I have to put my license number on that too? I don't like putting a personal license number on something that is so public. It is not going to protect anyone. Doing business, when I'm doing contracts, it makes sense. If I'm stamping drawings, it makes sense. If one wants to find out whether I'm a legitimate architect, they can look it up at the architecture site online. I tell my clients if they're hiring a contractor to look and see what complaints are for the contractors online. The public needs to know this. But why put the burden of this on the architect? We are not the problem. It's the people who are pretending to be us who are the problem. And it is going to cost quite a sum. I mean, I'm just a sole practitioner and I figure $800 to $1,000. And I feel like my privacy is being invaded with this as well by putting my personal licensing number in such a public place. So I would urge you to reconsider this. The other aspect is I wrote a response to this in January when I first heard about it. I read my email. If there's one thing I do, that's what I do. I've never heard about this before. It did not reach me for whatever reasons. I sent an email out to, I have about 2,000 people on my listserv when I have blog articles of architects, not only in California, but elsewhere. And I let a number of architects, do you know I did not find one architect who is familiar with this? So I think there is a disconnect in terms of communication because every architect I talk to is very much against this. Everyone feels that there is no protection for the public by us putting license numbers on all these forms of communication. We're professionals. We put it where we're required for our work. But this doesn't really make sense. It does not protect the public. So I think I am talking around in circles a little bit, but I do find this very upsetting because it is, in my mind, missing the point. And when I did respond, the responses to my response was not understanding what I was saying. They reworded what I said. And it was upsetting because it wasn't what I said. I'm very articulate. I know what to say, what the issues are, and I feel that they have not been addressed. By all means, let's go after those people who are saying they're architects and they're not. That's what we should be doing. And whether this board can do that or not, we need to find a way of doing that.
30 seconds.
30 seconds. Well, I think about that sums up, so I'll leave you with 20 seconds left. So that sums up, and thank you for listening to me in person on this, but I think this is something that really needs to be looked at again.
Thank you. We have no more public members here in West
Okay,
Hollywood.
thank you. We turn to virtual attendees.
Webex attendees, if you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. If you are a dial-in user, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. And our first request comes from Mark, AIA, California. Bear with me just a moment, Mark. I'm sending you a request to unmute your microphone.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, members of the board. Mark Christian with the American Institute of Architects, California. Many good comments have been mentioned by Laura and Paul in Sacramento and by Janice in West Hollywood. I will try to avoid repeating those. I may repeat myself in some ways, though, from what I said. I believe it was back at the September 2019 board meeting. And some comments have been mentioned to me in the past few months by architects. They do not completely understand. They do not understand this. We understand, AI California understands and completely supports the charge of the California Architects Board, which is to protect consumers. Absolutely get that, absolutely understand that, absolutely support that without reservation. We are having a hard time seeing how this benefits consumers. We need to remember that most clients of architects are sophisticated. They're not first-time clients of architects. They know what they are doing. Even if it is a first-time client of an architect, the proposal the architect gives to the client, prospective client, will include a license number. The contract will include a license number. The documents the architect submits to the building department or the planning department on behalf of the client is going to include a license number. Clients of architects know that they're architects. Putting this burden, this regulation, this responsibility, and subject to what was called once in the past a parking ticket on architects for the actions of non-architects does not make sense to my members, licensed architects who've commented to me. At the beginning of this item, it was mentioned that this policy of having licensees use a license number in all these different ways, which architects do when they're directly related to a client, lets the public know that these are licensed individuals regulated by the state, and that there's a licensing board or entity there to go to if they have an issue. Business and Professions Code 5536.22, paragraph 8, the written contract law, already says that when a licensed architect is providing a service to a client, must have a written contract, and that written contract must say that we are licensed by the state, by the California Architects Board, which is located at this address. It's already taken care of in the Architects Practice Act. I think if I continue, I'll repeat the comments that have been made by others. So thank you for granting me this time to speak. If you have any questions, happy to answer them. Thank you.
Mark, since you are very experienced in representing the industry for all these decades, can you, based on your personal observation, can you highlight what is the overarching concern here for a group of architects really have a problem with this? Is the cost of it, or we want to save our face because we're aligned with the doctors and the lawyers? They don't publish their name or their license on their business card or so forth. What is the central overarching concerns that from architecture community? Mark, I actually direct a question at you if you want to help us.
This is the moderator. Hold on just a moment. We're going to get Mark back.
Thank you, moderator. Sorry, Mr. President. I had muted myself and did not have the ability to unmute myself. The concern is that there is a new requirement that has to be done, a requirement that will have significant cost to comply, especially if it's a sole practitioner, or they do not understand how it's going to benefit the consumer. It's not going to stop the illegal advertising of architectural services. Someone advertising on Craigslist can just put a fake number up, C12345. That will happen. And it's putting the burden and the exposure to disciplinary action if there is a slip up with a fine, and this going on the record of the architect for potential clients to find out about, to see, all because of the activities of unlicensed people on websites such as Craigslist or what have you. They just don't see how architects taking on the cost, taking on exposure to disciplinary action, a fine, and the record on their license and whatever impact that would have for things they have no control over, unlicensed people using fake numbers or saying they do architectural services. They just don't understand it. They believe that this is an overreach without justification, and it provides absolutely no protection to the consumers. Those are the comments I've heard, Mr. President. I hope that makes sense.
Don't unmute yourself, or don't mute yourself.
I'm still here. Thank you.
Board Member Gladstone has a follow-up question.
Hi, Mark. I have a couple questions, and just for those of you out there, I'm not an architect. I'm a lawyer in the real estate world. I haven't made up my mind here as I sit, so I'm going to ask some probing questions that'll help me make up my mind. I've read the materials and most of the letters. Mark, did I hear you say that it's part of the Architects Practice Act that you have to have your license number on a proposal you make to a client?
That is my understanding. I will certainly defer to Laura or Paul or Janice, especially Laura, as she is in the traditional practice of architecture. I've been told that proposals perhaps responded to an RFP or an RFQ, you have to have a license. I will defer to Laura on that, or any of the other architects in Sacramento.
Pardon?
It has to be on the written contract.
Yeah. And that's a written contract. How about on a proposal?
Is there that's what I've been told. I cannot tell you for certain. I don't know if there's a licensed architect that might be able to answer that question better than I can, Mr. Gladstone.
Laura?
It's only if that proposal turns into the written contract. It's the written contract that requires the license number.
Okay, well, it concerns me a little bit that it's not on a proposal.
I mean, just to put that in, go ahead. May I speak? Is that okay? Brett, as a member and as an architect, most of the time a proposal is essentially heading in like contract format. So
yeah, proposals are in contract formats, and some contracts get accepted and some don't, and never get accepted. So it's somewhere in between. I have a couple other questions. The AIA, just to go over, ask you some questions about their positions on things. As I understand it, the AIA is an advocate of people having architecture degrees before they do a lot of work that is presently being done by architects. Is that right?
I don't know if I understand the question.
Well, I'm sorry. I meant to say the AIA encourages people to get an architecture license before they practice architecture and sign plans and or go out in the world and advertise as an architect. Is that right or wrong? I'm just confused.
I believe it would be accurate to state that the AI believes only licensed architects can offer and advertise architectural services. Yes.
Okay. And personally, I mean, I know what you're saying, that lawyers don't have to put on, their license number. I know that medical professionals don't have to, but that's not to say that that professions that don't have to shouldn't have to. I mean, professions that have the public safety in their hands, such as medical personnel, perhaps should. And architects do have public safety in their hands when they're designing buildings. So that's one thing, that concerns me a little bit. I would like to, it's my feeling that the Contractors Licensing Board has done a great job over the years, and perhaps some of the professional associations, in educating the public that contractors need to have licenses.
Over my decades as a lawyer, I've had many people come to me and say, my contractor performed poorly. How can I check? I understand he has to have a license. Would you check on that for me? So I think most members of the public are very aware of contractors needing that. I wonder whether there should be, and this goes along with the AIA proposal, better education of the public that architects should be licensed. I know that we don't have the money as our board to do the huge amount of education on that in that, but I'd like to, have some feeling from the AIA that they have willingness to go out there with us and educate the public the way the public has become so well educated on the need for contractors to have licenses. That's just my thought. If I'm going to, vote against this, I'd like to hear AIA's thoughts on doing that jointly with our board in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Gladstone. I think we would be absolutely, we would welcome the opportunity to do that with the California Architects Board.
Thank you.
Any other comment in any locations? I saw Paul. Did you want to say something? Okay, you can.
I think what's getting lost between the 45-day and the 15-day, because we focused on rulemaking, I think there's a big disconnect between the individual license and how we present ourselves as a firm. So playing out this scenario, if our president and CEO's license becomes connected to the firm in social media, on our website, yet we have 20 to 40 architects within our firm that not only
Microphone,
sign
please.
drawings, but represent themselves as licensed architects to the public, to our clients. Their license number does not match the one that would be associated with the firm name. That is actually one of our firm's biggest concerns, is that the linking of what is given to an individual from that which is associated with the firm in those presentments.
Yes.
Yeah, I would like to make one more comment, and it is that I personally, on any proposal that I send out, I put my stamp and my signature with my license number. I just feel like it gives that proposal more credibility. But if it would make this board more comfortable, maybe that would be something that could be considered as well as an alternative, is to tune up the Architects Practice Act and require that when you're going to propose on architectural services that your license number goes on there. I think that would be a much more effective way to work on this than what's currently proposed. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments, moderator?
We have a public comment in West Hollywood.
I'm also a certified, this is Janice Kent again, I'm also certified as that makes sense. I am a certified access specialist in California. So both a licensed architect and a CAST. I'm founding president of CASI, which was a professional organization that I started for CAST. And that was maybe about 12 years ago, 12 years ago. And one of the questions that came up is, if you're a licensed architect and you're doing CAST work, do you need to put your architectural license on that? And I remember at that time, as an organization, we did a bunch of research on that. And we were told, you're a licensed architect, and if you give any kind of documents or reports or anything like that, you would also need to put your architectural license on it, even though you're not doing quote unquote architecture. So that was something that it was, if you're giving a report, if you're giving a proposal, you are an architect, that's what you do. And that is what we have to do as CAST. And I don't see any issue with that. I like the idea of, I always put my architectural license and my CAST number when I give a proposal, when I give a report, anything like that. That doesn't hurt anything because that is professional. It would hurt me if I had to do it other places, like on my business card, you know? Someone asks me for my license or my CAS number, I'll give it to them. But
Thank you. I have a question, and this derives from the testimony from the AIA just now. How would you feel about amending the Architects Practice Act to require on proposals, whether they're accepted or not, some are just remain proposals and never get it turned into a contract, but have the license number on there?
Is he asking me that?
I believe he's asking you, yes.
Okay, if that's the case, I have no problem with that because that is, in a sense, a work product, a pre-work product. I do that anyway. That's what I personally do. It has my credentials. It has who I am.
Thank you.
Okay. If no further comments from public, we can return to the board discussion. And moderator, please let us know.
Nothing more on Webex.
Okay. So what's before us is on the surface, maybe in reality as well, it is a measure of consumer protection. I cannot see from a pure consumer protection perspective this is anything negative and harmful to them because they may not care, want to see the number, but if they do care, the number is available to them. So the argument become at what price, right, to have intent to protect the public, but has a price on our practitioners, which in a way is also, our constituents. And what is the balance, I guess? How much of so-called inconvenience looks like generally only inconvenience, and sometimes harder to implementing, I see that, versus the benefit. I think this is a challenge thing, and maybe it is important to align with other boards, see what is the direction they are moving to, such as CPAs and lawyers and other professions, medical doctors. So I hope we can make some kind of resolution because we are here for many hours. Anyone from the board has some of more viable resolutions to resolve that?
Tian, I'm not quite sure that I have a resolution, but I do want to make a few observations. So I think that Ms. Kostakis, is that Nostokis? I think her comment about corporate licenses or licensees within corporations is something that we've talked about before that I'm not quite sure we've resolved, quite honestly. But I think that is a more complicated issue. I think that the principal objective here is to protect those consumers, particularly those consumers who are seeking not corporate design services, but I'll just say residential design service for the lack of a better narrative, because I think that those consumers tend to be the most vulnerable in the spaces that we serve. I don't believe that most consumers go to the state's website and look up the license numbers of the people who they hire. Not that they can't, I just don't think that they do. And the fact that they don't doesn't necessarily mean that we should not provide additional protection should we think it necessary or should we think it helpful. But I do think that the balancing act that we're tasked with here is how Chairman Tian described it, is that it's trying to basically provide consumer protection without an overburden of practitioners. Because I think that Mr. Christian stated it perfectly, particularly the exposure and vulnerabilities. This is just another area where licenses could basically find themselves at risk of being of disciplinary actions and things of that nature because they don't sign, they didn't have their license on a contract because of just forgetfulness or omission of some sort. and I think the idea that it doesn't discourage non-practitioners or non-licensees from practicing architecture. I think that those are really legitimate statements. But again, my question is, in the absence of enforcement and overreaching for those people who are exposed to disciplinary actions, it doesn't necessarily discourage us from doing something. So I think, Tien, your point is valid, is that I'm not certain that the cost associated with the requirement is worth the additional protection. And I think that's really the question that we should be asking ourselves, aside from the issue of the corporate license, because I think that that's a more complicated issue.
Okay. So I have a cost-keeping items. Can I ask all board members, can you stay additional half hour to 40 minutes if needed?
Yes.
Anyone? Okay. So I have one member has to catch flight, so at some point she may take off, and I want to make sure we have a sixth person to form a quorum.
I have to make a 10-minute call at 4:15, but I'll be right back, but I wanted you to know that.
Okay, great. So we continue the conversation. Who has better ideas? I think we are, two of us agree. What is the burden and what is the benefit, return on investment, if you say that? Sunny? Yes, go for it.
I think we have a couple of comments here, but Robert is ready to speak.
Oh, yeah, I don't know if I have a better idea. I think that I can vote for the proposal as submitted. It's not new. It's been around for a couple of years, really. I was on Regulatory Enforcement Committee when it first came up. We had input from the outside architect members of the committee and from the board initially that addressed a lot of these concerns. And that's how it got amended from time to time. I do think some of the burdens on the profession, so to speak, are overstated. As an attorney, even though we're not required to do that, I can see I could easily do that, and my firm could do that if we were required to do so. I do think the regulation provides an attempt to address the issue Jen raised about the large multinational or multi-person architect firms. You look at B1, you just have to put one person's name there, essentially, on the advertising or business cards. I think that we have to point out that the contractors have a requirement under Business Profession Code 7030.5 to put their number in their advertisements. Mr. Christian talked about first sophisticated consumers who will see the architect's license on their contracts, who will see the contractor's license on their contracts. Well, why? The law requires it. I think it'd be naive to think in the absence of a law like that, that there would be great transparency to the consumers. And that was for sophisticated consumers. As Mr. Jones said, what about the unsophisticated consumers? Recall that in the area of the ADA, continuing education, net zero now we've seen, the fingerprint requirement. If we don't move, the legislature is going to force us to do so, it sounds like anyway. So better we get ahead of the curve and be able to shape the regulation as we wish. And again, recall that one of the impetus for this was the fact that the social media websites, in terms of the architect categories, refused to police them in any way, shape, or form, which led to abuses. None of the options that AIS suggested directly deal with that problem whatsoever that I can see. So I agree with Tien, there's nothing adverse to consumer protection in this proposal. The only negatively is one perhaps on the profession in terms of cost, et cetera, but our job one is consumer protection, so I would still support the regulation.
So actually, I can take advantage of two lawyers and plus two staff lawyers. What do you think if we have law and regulations and we don't have enough resource to enforce it? And is that possible lead to public think we are somewhat randomly going after some people? Because I know you will not have enough resource to go after all these scenarios. Some of these are corporate and insurance requirement, others are firm cultures, and then some people are bad people. Do we ask ourselves staff-wise when we're erecting this law, do we have the resource to enforce them fairly and equally?
Well, staff would have considered that in proposing this regulation. We have the resources to do it, and I would just note on the enforcement issue, any violation of the Architects Practice Act, we can discipline for. So we're not going and citing people all over the place for not having their license number on contracts or any other violation. So
my understanding regulation is, or maybe it's just in the comments in your report, is that the kind of enforcement you tend is a polite, gentle letter reminding people that they need to put their license number on their advertising of their card. And to me, that's not, you know, something for the architect profession to be worried about. And as for not doing that, you know, I think that, well, firstly, I can't quite understand why the architect's profession thinks that it demeans the profession to have something on their card that says their license number. I'm personally, when I see contractors hand out licenses, I'm extremely pleased to see a license number on there, extremely so. And when I don't see it, I get really nervous, and I tell my clients to worry about that, and I'll check the licensing board. So again, I have some proposals, and I'd like board members to give some input on it. You know, one is that we amend the Architects Practice Act to at least require that on proposals the license number be there, and if it's a huge architecture firm in multi-state, then I think it should say the firm's architect number. I don't know how that works specifically, but if you know what I mean, the firm identification and its credibility should be reflected in something there. So I don't think that's a major problem. You know, I also proposed a few minutes ago that we and AIA talk about spending a minimum amount of money and time over the next few years and put in our budget the kind of education that people have out there on contractors and they're needing to be licensed, because I know most of my clients know that contractors need to be licensed. And whether it's because their numbers have always appeared on cards that they receive from contractors, or whether it's because the contractor's licensing board has done that education. It could be either, it could be both. So those are my alternatives.
I have some answers, like have dialogue with you, but I want Sylvia discuss her point first.
Wow, this is such a passionate issue. I didn't expect it would be, you know, getting this much attention. It's all over the place, from very passionate people who think it's a good idea to sole practitioners are so worried about security. For some reason, when you put your license number out there, some people feel like it's very easy to steal. You know, it's like sort of like privacy issues. And then the one that I have the hardest time with is large firms. And when you have 40 architects in a firm, like your firm, we have, you know, hundreds. And where do you put? So the problem is all over the place. There's no single solution. So I'm going to ask a very controversial question. Could this whole issue go away? Or is it just something that is sort of the horse has left the barn kind of thing, and we have to do something? Where are we on this whole issue?
So the board's approved the language twice before, so we're in the middle of the regulatory process. So if the board doesn't want to approve the language today with the modified text, what I would request is that the board vote to withdraw the package. And Karen might have an alternative. This is going to come up in our next sunset review, and we presented it as a consumer protection issue. And so we're going to get asked about why we didn't pursue it. And so we need to I need to have that vote on the record rather than leave it. There might, I don't know, Karen, if you had a suggested alternative. We're going to get towards the 1 year mark on the process for regulations. So
yeah, you have 1 year from the date of the publication of the notice.
Which ends when?
December 30th. I'm a regulations nerd, and this particular modified text, responding to so many of these comments, seems to me like better than what you had before. But I don't know if you figure, well, we can bring it to as good as it can get and then withdraw it next meeting, Or do you want to hear more public comment? Because the public's responses and input addressed items that we didn't realize were being touched by the regulations. So we were learning about how to regulate in this space. But I don't know how the board wants to handle it, or that's not my job. My job is to just help you know what the process is. And at this point, you've worked on this for quite a while. You've put it out to notice, and staff made changes and proposed text that's better than what you had before.
So the two observations I have, Karen, one is, yes, staff definitely responded to public comment, but obviously we not responded the way that public was not received well enough. Otherwise, there will be no member here. And also notice that collectively we have actually a range of practitioners from Mark Christian is more his job into lobbying issues to the actual practitioners. So, and then you have some broader concerns here about the implementability. So it's complicated, and I hope this was not during my presidency, but it's here. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I go crazy. If there's extra burdens, but Laura think you're okay, you're not, you don't need it. Your resource can cover for that. In other words, then I'm okay. But otherwise, okay.
Tian, may I make a comment?
Yes, your turn.
Yeah, I've been waiting to sort of just give a summation of my experience. First of all, I want to apologize to staff because I know you guys have been working on this for us, but I also just kind of agree with some of the comments that were made that I've been learning about this as we go on. We have voted about it twice, but I actually feel like I've been involved 3 times because my very first meeting, can't remember how many years I've been here, was for landscape. When we were voting on the landscape, and at the time I was uncomfortable and inelegant and sort of stuck my foot in my mouth because I was trying to describe my discomfort with it. And then the second time when I actually did vote yes, I did sort of state my discomfort at the time. And then the third time I was absent because I was sick. I sort of was there for half the meeting, but wasn't there for the last part. I just have a couple things I just want to throw out there. The longer this has gone on, the more I've become uncomfortable with it because I don't think I agree with what Ron says. I think we should do something. I agree with what Robert says. I think we are required to sort of protect the consumers. But as it stands right now, I'm still not comfortable with it yet. I did reach out to Mark Christian before this, and he was so kind to post this on the sort of AIA message boards to get some feedback for me for how many jurisdictions have this. Something like 24, at least half the states sort of, luckily in 24 hours sort of responded back. There's 21 states that don't have this requirement, including Virginia, New York, Illinois, Hawaii, South Carolina, New Mexico, Rhode Island, Oregon, Louisiana, Arizona, Arkansas, Michigan, Maryland, Ohio, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Georgia, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Delaware, Alabama. Now, I'll qualify that with, a lot of those states also have some other, horrible things which we shouldn't sort of emulate necessarily. But then there were 3 states that got back that do have the requirement. Puerto Rico being one, New Jersey, whose language is actually similar to our proposed language, and then Florida, who has one of these, but it's much more limited to website. It's not on business cards. It's not on on-site signage. It's not on charitable donations, for instance, things like that. And I would assume it obviously would be on contracts and things like that. So anyway, all that to say that as it is right now, I think I want to protect the consumer. I haven't been given the evidence that the consumer is the harm that's currently in, I haven't been sort of laid out with the evidence how the consumer is being harmed right now that would make me feel confident at this point to continue to vote yes for it. I'm feeling like it would need to be changed and sort of pulled back and limited in order for me to support it. So,
Sunny, I need to have another housekeeping announcement. One of the members had to take an emergency call, and because we don't have a quorum after he left, so we need to take 5 minutes recess for all and come back at the 4:11.
have a quorum, you mean because Brett is leaving?
For 3 to 5 minutes, I have to.
Yeah, but then I suggest we wrap up after that, because
Yeah.
What's that?
prolonging this is any better.
Okay.
Okay, great time.
Yeah, so,
Boy, oh boy.
Recess for 5 minutes.
for 5 minutes, come back 11. It's 4:11.
Well, it's already 4:08. You know that, right?
Okay, so we had a good dialogue amongst ourselves and with the public members. At this moment, as a chair, I feel additional outreach and understanding the impact and also the new rationale we just alluded that public protection versus burden on the practitioners. And I think there will be a beneficial it is a beneficial move if we table this items to another time. And we can table in a way either direct it back to the regulatory and enforcement committee or defer to the full board or let staff working on a little bit more. So that is my suggestion. And I like to take this advantage as I'm a chair, so I want to ask, are you all interested in going along this direction?
Well, personally, I think that's a good idea. We're missing the full board, and I'd like more than just the 6 of us to weigh in. I think the staff has done a fantastic job of replying to the public, contrary to what some members of the public think. I think that not every word that the public says can be responded to, but on the whole, I think staff has done a great job, and we understand what the public has said. They've been very thorough and creative in their comments. But personally, I think there's an alternative to be perhaps to what is on the table. I'd like to have this during the time between now and whenever we are convened next, and we're not going to set a date, but I'd like to hear directly from the AIA and some members of the public on an alternative. I threw out some ideas. I'd like to hear some others. Board members can't really talk among themselves, but we could talk to staff, and members of the public, and the AIA they're welcome to provide comments to staff. And I personally like to hear alternatives, and I don't think I need to repeat the several that I discussed, but I like the idea.
Okay, any other comment? Yeah, Laura, you want to? Yeah.
I guess I just want a point of clarification. You said the Regulations and Enforcement Committee, and so would they be working with staff between now and September?
Potentially, we can work on the details, see if we direct at the committee or we direct back to staff back to another board meeting.
My concern about getting it to the committee is that there may not be time to decide on this by the end of the year. If we go to a committee and then this board, I don't think we've met the requirement to make a decision. Even if it's a decision not to do anything, we don't have time. So I would prefer that it come back here directly at a time to be named later.
Okay. Sylvia, any comment?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like because of the fact that CLARB has this provision, I'm a little concerned about the architects not having the provision. However, it's so much more complicated for architects because of the size of our firms and so forth. And today we've talked about a lot of the issues that have come up, not the least of which is a security issue. A lot of people feel that just by putting their number out there, you're just asking for someone to just grab your number and stick it on a letterhead and off they go, and they wouldn't be found out for a long time. I mean, the problems that I found are much more pronounced than the solution, than what it attempts to solve. So I don't know how you want to do this, but, you know, I prefer that it just die in committee or whatever happens with these things when you don't want it to go forward.
Okay.
So,
That's an option.
yeah.
No. So, sorry, actually, Sunny, at your location, I wear my closed vision glass. I cannot see screen, so I have not really responsive to your comments request. But anyway, before we formulate a motion, any last minute thoughts?
I have a comment. So, Sunny, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, you will.
No, and no problem. Good thing I have a big mouth because I certainly inserted myself, so I apologize for interjecting so much. But I think over here we don't have solutions. We don't know what to do either. We're sort of on different, you know. So we'll throw it back to you guys. I want to hear what Laura says and what she wants, because I think that's important to us. Because again, my apologies to staff because of all of the work that they put into this, and we've sort of been asleep at the wheel through this, and my opinions are just now sort of fully formulated. So I apologize to staff and would very much like to hear what Laura wants to do.
Okay, Laura, your turn to beat up us.
So first I'll just say, of course, we all work for you, so we'll do whatever the board directs. But we have put a lot of work into this, you know, both members through meetings and through the staff, and we've received a lot of public comments. Karen has helped our staff go through those public comments and respond. So the issues you're discussing today aren't new, and we have modified the language to address those. So if you ask us to work on it more, we can. I'm not sure how much better it will get, but we will certainly do whatever it is the board wants to do. I would suggest we do not have time to send it to REC. Even putting it over to the September board meeting means we may not make the one-year deadline. But as I said, we'll do whatever the board would like to do. But it is going to need a vote of some kind, so we can know, we need the board's position to be on record as to what you want to do with this.
This one does not have a regulatory deadline, right?
So the one-year deadline for the package is December 30th of 2022. So if we don't complete rulemaking by that date, it's dead. And when I say December 30th, that doesn't mean the board can meet December 10th and we would meet that deadline. It takes time. You have to back up from that to get that process done.
I am very open to compromise and to keep this alive. I do respect my responsibility to protect the consumers. I just don't believe that the broad nature of this does the consumer or the profession a good service. So if somebody wanted to make a motion to sort of go back, sort of Ron's sort of suggestion that we should do this, and then going back to Brett's comment that it be about, you know, and to Robert's point, that it be about Instagram, that if you use the word architect on Instagram, you have to include your license number and any proposal or contract, which I believe is kind of already, and I would also be okay with it on business cards. You know, ultimately, at the end of the day, I don't think it's necessary. But like if there's an individual, so but it's so complicated. But I'm open to compromise, and I don't know if any of the lawyers or staff has a way to sort of salvage this. I'm open. I just think right now it's too broad, and I'd have to vote no for it.
Sorry, one last comment I forgot. So it's fine to consider alternatives, and we'll look at whatever it is, you know, Brett and other members have suggested. But remember, the board needs to act on this package, and most of the alternatives are a separate issue. So that is really a separate discussion to consider versus the board's going to need to act on this.
That's clear. So does that mean that this package cannot be modified in a clean way today?
The package could be modified, but most of the alternatives are completely different issues. They're not to deal with presentments.
What can individual board members write the staff with proposed compromise language? And if so, can that new language be brought up at whenever our next meeting is prior to the end of the year?
So individual board members can, make suggestions to staff, and we can place this on the September agenda, you know, understanding that it still may not meet the deadline, it may not be successful. Karen wants to correct me.
Well, no, it's just, I know it's weird, but I love regulations. And I worked at the Board of Pharmacy when we were updating when we were updating the compounding regulations, and we put out language, we did a first modified, we did a second modified, we withdrew the package, we put out the language we had at the end, and did another first and another second, and withdrew. It took 3 times, and we have excellent, like standard for the nation, compounding regulations. If this isn't good enough, and you know you don't really want to move forward, you can withdraw the package. Regulations are recursive. You put out something, the public gives you feedback. You try to improve it. I mean, that's what makes regulations exciting. The government doesn't just do things in a black box. We publish it, and the public responds. So you're looking at a public response. You're looking at attempts to make it responsive. And if you don't feel that you want to move forward with this, it's okay to just withdraw the package. It doesn't mean that next meeting you can't have a new package you put forward.
Let me
It's
put
up to
you.
you.
Let me put you on the spot. With all your experience, your first-hand experience of the entire 2.5 years, which one you prefer? Board can defer this to a future board meeting to take action on it, or board said we simply put the entire item out of our discussion and waiting for future time to have a new regulations. What is the staff preference?
I would say we're not, if the board withdraws this, the staff is not going to recommend restarting the process. I don't know, it's a lot of staff resources to work on regulations, and I just don't, unless you direct us to, that's not what I would dedicate our resources to. We have a lot of other regulation packages to work on.
So the drop's a drop. Okay. Before I make a motion, I was thinking about defer to another board meeting. Now we have to contemplate drop this entirely and let the regulatory environment bring the subject again, and we will act again.
I think if people don't like the idea, they just simply vote down this continuance that you're going to make a motion for.
I'm testing the water.
Yeah.
I think.
Yes, Robert Pearman. I guess I would say, yeah, let's bring it back in September, and at that point, either vote thumbs up or thumbs down, whatever's the best we've got on before us then.
The decision is made. You can overrule me. I propose such motion that we will defer this agenda item to a future board meeting for the full board to act on.
I agree.
No, I don't know. Ask Mike.
I second.
You can do a motion if you'd like.
Okay, we do a motion.
Not doing anything, I think, would have the effect of that because the process can't move forward anyways, but having a motion implies we want the item come back at least one more time, yeah? Okay, so someone second already? Sunny, okay. Can we take the risk and start to vote? Before that, we need to ask for public comment. Start with the room and the remote location and virtual.
Clarification, the second was from Robert.
No comments from the room, and let's turn to virtual.
We have a comment.
This is Janice Kent again. Talking with some of the other AIA chapters, they had a bunch of ideas of what could be done that would protect the public. And I think that that would be ideas that are worth exploring. I don't know all of their individual ideas. I have some of my own, but I think that the whole idea is what's to protect the public, not to make it harder for architects. And I think that that is worth exploring and giving a lot of emphasis to.
Anyone from virtual?
We are now open for public comment via Webex. If you would like to make a comment, please type the word comment into the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and send that comment to all participants. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment.
You want to leave?
Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to return to the agenda?
Good. Okay. Okay. But anyway, the motion is deferred to a future board meeting, so.
I have one more comment.
Okay. Yes, and before vote.
Just out of respect to the AIA and all members of the public, I encourage my fellow board members to do what I hope to do, which is to comment on the specific alternatives that AIA and the AIA members have proposed as an alternative. Some I liked, some I didn't, but I think out of respect to them, they should hear from board members why we may not have liked some of their alternative proposals. And maybe we like some. That's just my thought.
But with that said, I really think it's important to thank the engagement and devotion of the public members. Literally start from 10, depends how long the commute was, and that is so important to us. We feel we are supported, and our work, has your attention. So thank you again, and I hope the outcome of the meeting somewhat in harmony of both the industry and the notion of public protection. So with that said, we don't have other agenda items. Oh, vote. Most important, that's a motion on the floor, which is deferred to a future board meeting to act on. And we're ready for, yes, call the roll? Yeah. Okay.
Calling the roll. We're voting on continuing the discussion at the next board meeting.
Not the next board meeting, we don't know yet. We need to make a decision.
Doesn't need mic.
You need a mic.
All I'm saying is that I was going to be in favor of it if we were able to bring these ideas. But I just was told by Laura that that would be a whole different subject matter.
Yeah, most of the suggestions don't deal with this package. So it's fine to consider alternatives, but that has nothing to do with this regulatory package. They're not things that you would amend into this. They're completely separate proposals.
Right.
Okay.
Is that clear to everybody?
Yeah, it's okay. Even if we are revisiting the similar issues or same issues, then we have the benefit of few more board members. That part I actually like.
Okay.
And also for today, our legal counsel just reminded me, if we ever vote something, everything is important, but we need to have a great majority. We have to have a 5 member at least to vote on the same things to make it pass. So because we are missing 3 board members.
Got it.
I think tabling it and make a decision at that time is a viable options. Laura, I don't think this can change. I don't think this have a negative impact on our decision making.
Okay.
Just time difference.
So, okay, can someone read a motion before I do the roll?
The motion is table item, agenda item M, to a future board meeting to act on.
Second by you again.
Okay. I'll second.
It's been seconded already.
Sunny second.
Oh, it's already been seconded? Okay.
Call for the question.
All the questions.
Shall I do the roll?
Yeah, we went through public comment.
Roll call. Tian Feng.
Aye.
Brett Gladstone, yes. Mitra Kanani. Absent. Sylvia Kwan.
Aye.
Ron Jones.
No.
Robert Pearman.
Aye.
Nielsa Serrano.
No.
Not here. And Sonny Ward.
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you so much, everyone. I want to use this beautiful tool. Our meeting is at June.